So I don't know whether we've got any viewers yet. So this is Caolan Robertson again from Kyiv, from Ukraine, but really you've been in Chernobyl.
Yeah, I wanted to go to Chernobyl for like a decade. I remember hearing about it when I was pretty young, when I was a teenager, and
Well,
always wanting to visit.
when was it? It was 1986, wasn't it?
1987, I think.
Yeah. So
No?
how old were
So,
you then?
how old was I then? Well, I was born in 1995,
Oh, you
so
weren't you weren't alive.
certainly not.
1987. I remember it happening, and I remember sort of the anxiety of looking up and thinking, uh, is this radiation cloud going to get over to us? Of course, it did. We just didn't pay any attention to it. Um,
Yeah,
the,
yeah.
the the question. I mean, it's very dramatic. And did you see the the television sort of dramatization of it?
The HBO film, yeah, the
Yes,
series.
yes.
It was amazing.
It was
Yeah.
amazing, wasn't it? So, did you feel that while you were there?
Yes, it was like the edge of the earth. And I don't know if that's because it's visiting Chernobyl during wartime, which is unusual, or visiting Chernobyl. But what I didn't realize is when I arrived is so I got a call last night from a friend of mine. His name is Harry, and he basically crowdfunds from US and UK audiences to pay for drone technology, drone jammers, new types of drones, and then delivers them to the front line. So next week I'll be going to Pokrovsk and Kramatorsk with him, and he
Oh my
basically
goodness.
delivers these things directly to battalions and regiments that need this stuff. And he's
Hmm.
raised about $1 million. It's amazing. We became good friends, and he called me last night and said, "Caolan, do you want to go on a trip?" I went, "Yes." And he said, "Do you want to go to Chernobyl tomorrow at 9 a.m.?" So I said, "Yes." So what I was really interested in was driving up the road from Kyiv to Chernobyl, because Chernobyl is only 9 kilometers from Belarus border, but the road that I was going to be driving up to get there is the road that the 60-kilometer convoy was on.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to
How long
see
does it
that.
take?
It took me about maybe just under 2 hours
Yeah.
to get right there. And what I didn't realize when I got there was that Chernobyl is different to the actual area where the plant is. Um,
Well,
and
so the plant is called Chernobyl, isn't it? Or Chernobyl is the whole area.
yeah, yeah.
You've got the town of
There,
Pripyat,
so Pripyat is the town where the plant is.
right?
This is where the amusement park is. This is where the Ferris wheel is. This is where the sort of famous
And
sites are. That is
there's a
like
river.
attached to it.
There's a river around it, isn't there?
There's the Pripyat Pond, which is like almost like the cooling pond from the tower, and then there's the Pripyat River, which goes all the way across, and there's a massive bridge that goes across that, which has been blown, which I went on, which was crazy. They allowed me through the checkpoint to actually physically walk down that bridge into the river. So it was very interesting seeing that whole convoy. And what I saw that was super interesting as well was when you are in a car and you're on a road where a lot of tanks have been, the tank tracks leave grooves in the road, because tanks are not really supposed to be, they're not really designed to be driven on civilian roads. They're designed to
Yes.
be in fields and things. They leave little grooves in the tarmac. So when you're driving somewhere where there's been lots of tanks, it sounds like a Spitfire. It's like it has like a loud humming
Goodness.
sound. It's almost like a sound of the war.
And
So as
and
you
are there any tanks left there now? Because a lot of them were abandoned.
There's still quite a few actually on the sides of the roads. When you get north of Irpin and Hostomel, which is where the Russians were stopped, things start to degrade a bit more. There's been a
Hmm.
lot of repairs and reconstruction in Hostomel and Irpin, but when you get north of that, um, things still look blown up and destroyed,
Isn't
and
this
you
the
can still see
same?
tanks.
Isn't this the same road that takes you up to Butcher as well?
Yes,
Or-
it's the same road. It goes straight north of Kiev and straight up. It's literally a straight road into Belarus. And
Mhm.
it gave me a good geographical idea of how that convoy came down and just the length it was. And it was nice to see that.
And
I'm
why
very
Putin must have thought it was a doddle.
well. So Harry, who drove me to Chernobyl today, said he had some souvenirs in his house, and I said, "What are they?" And he said, "They're souvenirs from the convoy." And he showed me these souvenirs, and they were victory uniforms from a convoy towards the back. And it was basically these really nice sort of suits and jackets with fake flowers and Russian flags that at the back of the convoy they expected to do as a victory parade when they got to Kiev. And he had these in his house, they're like victory uniforms
Oh
that the
my
soldiers
goodness.
had at the back of the convoy. And I was looking at these thinking, God, they really thought that they would come to this city and wear these, and they'd be, they'd be seen as victors, which was pretty weird to see, really. I really wanted one as a souvenir, but he said, "There's no, it's too special." But that was very unusual to see. The ties and the bow ties and this is
Yeah,
what the
yeah, yeah.
Russians packed when they thought they would come here. But unfortunately, fortunately, actually, they were stopped, and the Ukrainians managed to collect these souvenirs. They're very nice souvenirs. And he also had some of the victory medals because they were going to do a
Oh
victory
yes, of
parade the next
course,
day,
of
right?
course. Yes, yes, yes.
So he had some of the medals that they were going to give out to the Russian soldiers from the Russian commanders that they would give them in Kiev,
No.
which was crazy,
My
crazy to
goodness.
hold these
So,
things, right?
uh, I've got a message here from a person called Major Gruber, which sounds like a character out of Allo Allo. Is Caolan ever shocked when reminded about how close Chernobyl is to Kiev? You've sort of answered that question.
Every time. I mean, I was at the top of the Intercontinental Hotel, which is on this street.
Can you see? Can you see Chernobyl from
Yes.
Kiev? Huh?
No, 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 no. But you can see
No.
Hostomel and Irpin. If you're high up enough in Kiev, you can basically see the very, very far away skyline of the high rises that are in Irpin.
Hmm.
What shocks me about Irpin, which I always I'm surprised about, is how much of a upper middle class, really nice area it is. It is distance wise and class wise the same as sort of Hampstead kind of type thing in London, if you think of it
So,
like
so,
this.
so it's a little bit like the Moscow version of Rubliovka, where
Hmm.
all the rich people live.
Yeah, it's really nice. I mean, it's got a university. It's all educated
Oh, right.
town. It's nice, but it really shocks me. I go to Irpin quite a lot and Hostomel a lot because there's filming locations there that I use, and it's a 30-minute drive without traffic. It's like going to Hampstead, and it there's a river, the Irpin River, that flows through that, and
Hmm.
they've only just finished rebuilding the bridges over that. Before it was pontoons that you would have to drive over, and I remember going over that for the first time before they've rebuilt them and being so shocked how close it was. I mean, it's like scary. Like you can actually still feel it. I mean, if I was sitting here in 2022, I would have heard the artillery from here. Like it was close. They were in the outskirts of the city, but not just the outskirts. They also sent sabotage teams into Kiev that made it into the city, and there was battles in the city because of this. But it's always interesting going down that road. I find that road fascinating because the Russians only filled up enough petrol and diesel in their tanks to go, I think it was 100 kilometers. I don't know what it is from Belarus to Kiev. And they weren't expecting any resistance. And so when they were stopped in the first few towns, briefly in Chernobyl, briefly in the towns between Chernobyl and Hostomel, they kept the tanks running, and they basically ran out of fuel,
Yeah.
and they ran out of water, and they ran out of supplies. And it's just, driving down that road today, you could feel it, like you could see it. It was kind of very, very interesting. So I've wanted to do that for a while, but then going to Chernobyl was, I was just very surprised that it was
Do,
that there was a town called Chernobyl, and then there was Pripyat, which is a separate town, and that's the town that's devastated and deserted. And what I realized when I got there, which was crazy, is Harry told me, because I could see trenches in the Red Forest as
yeah,
we
yeah.
drove on the road from there to Pripyat, and I said, "Why the hell are there trenches in the Red Forest?" And he said, "Because the Russians dug the trenches as fallback positions and defense positions when they were being pushed out of Hostomel." I said, "Right." And he was like, "And they were unprotected. They dug them, and a lot of them died of radiation sickness because they didn't know what Chernobyl even really was. They weren't really
So,
told."
so did you have to wear a radiation suit? I've got a question from Steve C, who says, ask him why he is exposing himself to radiation. These people are very possessive. Ask him
Mm.
why he's exposing himself to radiation following the runaway fission reaction caused by the failure of the control rods.
Because if you
Ask him.
drive, so
Oh, okay. Go on.
If you drive through that region very quickly, you're not exposed to much. There was a checkpoint that I went through when I left
Yeah.
that city, when I left Chernobyl a few hours ago, and you basically have to go into a big room and you have to step into this Soviet-looking sort of X-ray machine, and you hold on to these pulses, and then it goes beep beep, which means you're all clear, and it measures your radiation levels, and you have to do that before you leave Chernobyl. I've just done this.
And presumably you
And
also take iodine tablets.
Yeah, sure. And
Right.
then
Oh, you don't.
and I scored 0. Okay, so there's no
Okay.
radiation. But
Okay.
I
And
drove through the Red
congratulations.
Forest at high speed. We did not stop
Congratulations.
for lunch. I went through very quickly. The reason I went to Chernobyl was not for some sort of vacation, by the way. The reason I went to Chernobyl is because I was with the 241st Regiment, who were created in 2022 here in Kyiv, who fought in Bakhmut and Chasiv Yar, who have now all been redeployed to and retrained to use drone equipment, FPV drone equipment. And they were all artillery. Now most people in artillery are being retrained to use drone equipment because the war is changing here and it's becoming drones.
Yeah.
And they were testing new drone jammers, and they were testing new drone technology in Chernobyl because it's a good place to do it. It's a
Right.
way for, it's not going to upset the air defense systems of Kyiv. You know, flying drones is not a good idea here right now. It will set off the Patriot air defense system. So I went to Chernobyl with them to see how they were. Well, I wanted to figure out how drones work, right? Drones chased me in Kherson. I
That's
captured
why I
how the
wanted to
Russians were
talk.
doing that.
I
Now I
want to
wanted to know
talk to
how
you
they
about that.
work.
So,
Yeah, so now I want to
so,
know how they work. So that's
so
why I went there.
people in Kyiv, sort of mainstream media journalists who are sort of locked in their Kievian hotels, drinking champagne, being safe. They presumably look upon you with a certain amount of envy because you are getting to these extraordinary places like Kherson, Zaporizhia, Chernobyl. Um,
Well,
you're
I'm
going.
not
You're
here for a holiday, and a lot of journalists are. A lot of journalists are here because, it's cheap to live here, and they can tell their friends in their hometown about their time, and they can sound interesting. I'm here to actually show people what is going on in this country.
mm,
I'm only in Kyiv so that I can have somewhere that's safe and quiet to edit these films, and I'm only here a few days at a time, so I don't associate with these sort of people who are war tourists. I try to actually like cover what's going on. So I'm always every single week I'm always in a different part of Ukraine. Um, but I wanted to know how drones worked, and I think people don't really get how drones work. You know, when I talk to a Western audience on my Patreon, on anywhere, they always say, "Oh, what is FPV? What's POV? What's a kamikaze drone?" And I thought, God, a lot of people don't know like the basics 101 of how all this works. So I thought I would go to this regiment and film the process, film how they make drones, film how they do flight tests,
yes.
film how they take it off, film the risks, the problems, what's going to happen next.
So
So
you've
it
got
was
the
an
drones that you
important
sort of
trip.
you've got the drones that you sort of fire off like a rocket, and then you've got the drones that like the toy drones. You've got the way you can. So
Well, so there's different
those,
types, right? There's an old
come
school
on,
type of drone that existed before. A drone is basically
which is
something that
unmanned
is
aircraft.
unmanned, and
Yeah.
traditional types of drones looked like this, right? This is a Russian-made drone that was downed over the skies of Kyiv. They look like this, right? This is kind of an old school drone. This was downed about 6 months ago. It's reconnaissance. You put a camera in the front. It's got two wings, and it's got propellers on either side. That is the kind of traditional old school type of drone. What has happened is in the last year, the type of drones that you buy your kid for Christmas, Mavics, drones that you wear with goggles, that you
Hmm.
fly with goggles, have started entering the war. And there's two ways that these drones are used. One, and these are four propeller, drones that you see on the high street in Britain. One is they're kamikaze drones. Suicide drones. They're basically drones that fly very, very, very quickly. They don't hover up and down, left and right. They fly, in this sort of FPV crazy way, and they have munitions inside of them, and they crash into a target. They're either pre-located with the target system, or there's someone with a goggles that's literally directing them into a target. Those are FPV drones, kamikaze drones. We see this in Kherson. We see this in the east. The other types of drones are similar for propeller systems that drop grenades, that drop munitions. They can drop anything that's basically homemade. You can drop anything that you want. They are they're also used very heavily. And then you've also got Lancet drones, which have started to be used. They've got like a 60-kilometer range. They're very, very, very dangerous. They're kind of like extreme versions of this. But basically, drones are now defining this war. And the soldiers that I spoke to today in Chernobyl who were testing and training were artillerymen. They were people that worked artillery. And now they're training to be drone pilots because that is where things are going. This war, within 6 months, I reckon artillery will be almost redundant. Because if you could take look at an artillery shell, like it's a dome like this, right? It's a little thing. You fire it out of a system and you hope it lands in the right place, given the wind in the right direction, but you don't really know where it's going, right? You have to readjust your system constantly, and it's a gamble. Imagine if you could take that shell, put a camera on it, put propellers on it, and have it specific to its target, and watch where it's going.
This is what you experienced in Kherson.
Yeah, so it's basically like technological modernized artillery shells that can land
So the Russians
wherever.
were, yeah, the Russians were following you with their drone and would drop a grenade or something onto your car.
In
Or
Kherson, the drone that was following me in my documentary was hovering above, which means that it was a drone that would drop something. And that's what they've been using against civilians a lot recently. However, there's also been videos coming out in the last 2 days that are frightening, showing their kamikaze drones flying into balconies and into people's windows, breaking the windows, and then flying another drone in straight afterwards. Kamikaze drones seem to now be replacing these drop drones. It's far more frightening. It has a serious sort of mental impact on the local population. And these drones are getting cheaper to make, so the Russians don't mind destroying them. You know, a kamikaze drone would have cost a couple $1,000s. Probably a few years ago. Now it's $200. So it doesn't matter if it gets destroyed, and it's more effective. And what is also the case is drone jammers are less effective against kamikaze drones because, say, a drone jammer can stop a drone within a 500-meter radius, right? It will scramble its systems. If you have that drone traveling at 60 miles an hour towards you, directly towards you,
yeah,
and suddenly its system gets scrambled and it doesn't know where it's going, it's still going to continue on that trajectory and it's still going to hit its target because of the velocity. It's just going. So it's much harder to stop. Whereas with a drone that's hovering above you, it will get scrambled and it will get lost. So also with the battalion today, that was very interesting is we were testing out different frequencies, and they were saying, well, now the Russians are using lower frequencies because they've realized that the Ukrainians drone jammers are high frequencies and mid frequencies, and it's basically right now a battle and a war between frequencies, and it's a cat and mouse chase all over the eastern front here. And so the drones that I saw designed today, made today, will be deployed, and the drone jammer that was donated today by the person, by Harry, which was a successful test, will be sent to the Kramatorsk area in 3 days. So this will all be sent to the eastern front. So it's really interesting. It's really interesting. It's like a rapid development of warfare. And yes, drones have been used in the last few years in Ukraine. I'm sure they have, but the battle right now isn't so much physical in the trenches. It's the battle of technology. It's really interesting. And the West, and what's weird is the battalions that I was working with today, and the regiments that I've seen before who do drone development and who are filled with drone pilots, get all their money and funding from PayPal, from people in Britain and America. And I don't really understand that. Because if at the front line of the cutting edge of winning this war is drones, and America's sending 2 billion new age package, all these sort of things, I don't know why it's not going into drones. I don't know why it's going, I don't know where that's going. But that's quite strange. It's basically funded by individuals. They rely on this, you know?
Can I pick up some comments which are coming in? There's a person here called Suzanne Ordish who says drone scares me too, but she says that she used to she used to go to if I can find it. She said she used to go to. No, it's Larry Kipping says I visited Kiev once and considered a visit to Chernobyl myself. So glad I didn't. Still pockets of lethal radiation levels. Well, we
It's
talked
fine. I
about
mean, if
that.
you go through it quickly, it's okay. You know, there are people there positioned in checkpoints all over the place. They're alive. You know, it's if you spend a lot of time there, it's not great. If you start digging up soil in the Red Forest like the Russians did, that's not, you know, you're going to die. But it's if you drive through it, it's fine. If you stop briefly, it's fine. All of the trees back in the 80s and the leaves that absorbed the radiation have been cut down. So there's a lot of empty forests because they were highly radioactive. And the trees and the pines and the leaves have been buried deep under the soil in that region. So a lot of it's been, you know, taken care of. Um, you know, it's fine. You know, you
Yeah.
just can't start messing with the soil. You can't start digging things up, and you can't start hanging around. You just go through it, and it's absolutely fine.
I'm so sorry. You're braver than I am. Frankly, I take my hat off to you. Really. Um,
Well, I mean, I wanted to go there because you know it shows how and you cannot fly drones anywhere else. This seems to be the area where they're flying drones and they're testing
right.
drones, and I wanted to know how it works. So there is a justifiable journalistic reason for this. It's not for fun, but was interesting to see it. I actually because I was with the regiment, the 241, that's very respected. Um, the people at the checkpoint on the Pripyat River bridge let me onto that bridge. And this bridge, you know, I walked all the way across
The,
this bridge. It's like a huge suspension bridge, looks like the Welsh Bridge.
right.
They let me go all the way across it, and then literally the bridge just collapses and like literally nosedives like this into the river. And you could see the nuclear plant from that bridge. You could see the town of Chernobyl from that bridge, but it's also the bridge that the Russian convoy went across. And I climbed down it right into the river and then across the pontoon, which was really interesting.
Oh, I've
But
seen
you
those photographs. I've seen that footage.
Yes, it was shocking that I managed to do that. But also, it gave me a good visual and geographical idea in my mind that if the Russians want to ever try and reinvade from Belarus, they're not going to ever be able to do that because that bridge is gone and that river is wide. It looks like as wide as the river between England and Wales.
Right. Yes.
So there's no way of reinvading Kiev from the north in the way that they tried to before. But it was very interesting to see it and walk down it. It was like kind of surreal.
My
I was like,
goodness.
oh my God.
Am I allowed to change the subject slightly? I've got another question here, which you're going to be horrified by.
Good. Yeah,
Are
no,
you
try
are
me.
you are
I've
you
just been to
ready?
Chernobyl. I'm horrified by whatever.
Right.
Yeah, go
This
on.
is from a person called Gordon Loomer, who says, "Why not ask him about his work with Tommy Robinson?"
Yeah, well, I discuss this in every fucking
I'm
interview that I
so
do.
sorry.
No, it's fine. It's just people like to think that they know everything,
I
and that
know
they
they
like to
do.
have like an edge
They're
against me.
they're
And
very
it's like I
possessive.
talk about this. I talk about this all the time, and it's just annoying because it's like a gotcha. It's like, okay, look, 10 years ago. For 6 months, I worked with someone on the far right when I was an idiot teenager who was radicalized. And I spent 8 years after that making content that was about anti disinformation, anti far right content, and dedicating my basic entire life to the opposite kind of work with that. I hope that's enough for you. I'm sick of talking about it. I mean, it's like every interview that I do, I talk about how radicalization works with young people, of which tens of millions of young people my age believe in these kind of ideologies. This is
Hmm.
not like an extreme thing to believe. I mean, I think it's extreme, but it's not like a gotcha. And I created a charity to try and help young people get out of the far right. So yeah, ask me about it. But I don't care anymore. I'm in Ukraine now. I'm literally like risking my life to make content to show the world what the fascist dictator Putin is doing, anti propaganda. Ask me about Tommy Robinson later. I actually don't care anymore, and this is the last time I will ever talk about this. I am bored of
Congratulations.
talking about this. This is 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Move on. Anyone that asks these questions, move on with your life and do something else with your life. Like, I'm bored of talking about it.
I
Move on.
agree. I find the YouTube thing is extraordinarily repetitive.
No,
Um,
I don't get these comments on YouTube. Actually, I don't get them on Twitter anymore. These are people who are usually far right that ask me about this, or they're far left scum, commies who like the USSR, who like Putin, who like Stop the War Coalition, which, by the way,
yeah.
thinks that Britain shouldn't arm Ukraine. And these are scum. These are Antifa type scum. I don't want anything to do with the far left and the far right ever. I mean,
Mm,
these people are both two sides of the same coin. They're both the same thing. And the only two people that criticize me nowadays about my previous involvement with Tommy, like when I was a kid, are people on the far left or the far right, because they're both the same thing. And I'm not engaging with them anymore. I'm
yes.
completely disinterested.
Yeah. No, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And so what I'm sort of a little bit of me is speechless there, but I'm also my voice has gone funny. I'm still I'm still recovering from flu. So I've got this catch in my voice which makes me sound like a masculine version of Judy Dench. Um, I think.
No, you sound fine.
Yeah, well,
Sounds fine.
any minute now, I feel I'm about to give orders to James Bond. But look, what are your next plans?
So, I'm going to cover the US election for Byline.
Hmm.
On Tuesday, I'm going to do a special overnight election coverage. I'm going to get the reactions of Ukrainians to hopefully not the horror of the Trump win, which I've seen is possible. And then on Thursday, I'm going to do six drone deliveries to extremely hot regions in the east: Suja, Kramatorsk, Pokrovsk, and others. So I'm going to go on my most dangerous trip. This is going to
Yeah.
be highly dramatic. And I have heard that the front line is collapsing in some areas there, and I want to gauge what is actually going on. Information is blurry coming out of that region, and I want to figure out what's actually happening. And you can gauge that on the ground. And I also want to show the great work that he's doing, supplying life-saving drone jammers to soldiers in positions there. So I think it'll be a really important trip. I think it will seriously gauge what's happening in the east of this country right now. I arrived here 2.5 months ago. I covered Zaporizhia, Kherson, the south. Today I covered what they're doing in Chernobyl, which is the north, and now
Yeah.
this is my final trip before Christmas, which will be in the east. So I think it will encapsulate, encompass, in terms of my reporting, everything in this country before Christmas time. You know, it'll be basically every region,
Yes.
which is what I wanted to do.
It's dramatic, Conan. Um, but one other thing I was going to say. Yeah, there's a lot of talk about the collapse of the Ukraine troops at the moment. This isn't true, is it? This is again
It's difficult to
propaganda.
talk about because I'm very supportive of Ukraine, and it's not good to be negative about anything that's happening here. But there are extremely concerning developments happening in the
Is,
east right now, and we
and
think of the front line.
is this because of the North Koreans?
No, this is because Putin is trying to prove to the world before the US election that Ukraine can't win this war, and he's throwing everybody that he has at it. Today, they lost 1,500 soldiers. Yesterday, the Russians lost 1,600 soldiers. Averages 6 months ago were 600 a day. The Russian losses are unprecedented, biggest since the full-scale invasion, because Putin is throwing everything he has at this
So,
between now and November 5th.
if you were a Russian soldier, what is your life expectancy? It's a matter of hours, isn't it?
Fortunately, short. And that's good because you shouldn't be in this country, and you should die if you try and come here. But it's short, and they're suffering heavy losses. The North Korean soldiers that have arrived in this country are soldiers that have been brought up in and trained in defensive
Mm,
positions. What is North Korea? It's a border. It's a border country. It's the North
yeah.
Korean border. That's what soldiers do there. They will be put into Kursk to stop further advances, and they will be put into Crimea to defend Crimea. They are defensive position soldiers. They're not they're not active combat
But
soldiers.
what I
So
find
they have no influence on the east.
I find so extraordinary is the two stories. Number one, that the North Koreans were placed in offensive positions and defected, and number two, that the North Koreans had never got to the front line. They were being trained in Russia. So some
They
of
were
them
trained
were
in
deployed.
Russia for a few weeks, but this is to deal with language barriers and show them how to use the types of weapons that they have. I mean, you can't learn much if you don't speak Russian and you're in a Russian training camp. I mean, it's just what they learned was bullshit. It was nothing. 18 have defected from 40 that were sent to a battalion in Kursk because they realized that the Russian army was so ineffective. Only 2 weeks ago, no, last week. They are defecting, which is probably hilarious because this is the first time North Korean defectors have defected and wanted to come back to North Korea. So this is kind of a crazy situation. But they have no influence on the front lines here. The front line is advancing because Putin has given the orders to the commanders of the battalions in the east here to throw everything they have at this. And it's working to an extent. They are taking ground at a breakneck speed, which is concerning. And we think of front lines as places that move very slowly. They do. However, in World War II, we looked at the German front lines in Poland and France, and they were stabilized for, say, a year at some time, 6 months at some times, and then they broke, and then you saw advances of 60 kilometers a day. We could see this towards Dnipro. We could see this towards Zaporizhia. This could happen. It is possible. When things start to break down, then all hell breaks loose. This is not the situation that I want to happen, but this is possible.
Yes.
So I don't know. So that's why I'm going to the east to find out. I want to see what's going on.
Yes, sorry, I've got to get somebody at my door, but can I open my door for a second? Stop it.
Yes.
I open my door for a second, and I have one more question for you. Can hold on one second. Wait.
Of course. Yeah. No, it's fine. Oh my god. Hello. If there's anyone still here, I am exhausted. I left here at like 6 a.m. just after curfew to go to Chernobyl, filmed with these battalions all day, went across this bridge, had nightmares at checkpoints, accreditation. It was really hard.
I'm still here.
No, it's fine. I was just saying I'm exhausted because I had a nightmare at all the military checkpoints to get into Chernobyl because they don't really like journalists going in there right now because it's full of Russian saboteurs and reconnaissance groups in the forests of that region.
Oh, really? But you didn't see anything?
I didn't see this, but this is a serious problem right now from Belarus.
So look, the question I've got before we go is about your prediction about the American election. Are you
so Trump will probably win this election, 100%. I don't want to predict this. I don't want this to happen, but I think this will happen. The money markets, the stock, if you're betting on Trump right now, the bets are for him. And those betting companies employ the best political analysts in the world. I think Trump's going to win, which means that funding will cease immediately for Ukraine, and Ukraine will be on its own. And hopefully the liberal countries of Europe will try to make an example and set themselves apart from what America will become and quadruple their funding to this country. That's the only saving grace. 100%. Mark my words and bookmark this.
I'm going to have to go, otherwise I'm going to start coughing ridiculously.
That's
Caolan,
okay.
thank you.
I need to sleep anyway.
What? Say again?
I need to sleep anyway. So
you do. The difference in time zones is astronomical. Look, get some sleep. Congratulations. And as ever, it's always wonderful to talk to you. And
you too. Have a great night.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Okay. Good night.